So welcome back to the podcast. One could argue that this market, with volatility in interest rates, nearly 8% inflation, with all the rising costs associated to it, a war in Eastern Europe between Ukraine and Russia, God bless, and yes, historic low time on market. I didn't say inventory, I said time on market, and an overwhelming amount of buyer demand in almost every case. One could argue that this market is one of the most challenging markets we've ever experienced. Think about that. Think about that for you. Think about it as you think about your business. And you can see that if you're watching the video, I literally wrote out 16 different pages of thoughts to help you navigate this market, to navigate this moment in time for you, for your family, for your business, for your mindset, and so much more. So buckle up. Here we go. When I think about different markets, I can go back to, hey, we got to survive until 1995. Now, I might be dating myself, or some of my veteran friends out there can remember what happened post the late 80s stock market crash as the real estate market crumbled following that. And, it was certainly a challenging market. I can also think about 2000 when the internet bubble burst, or the intensity and tragedy of 9/11 and how that stopped the world. Working with so many of my high-end clients at the time that were just like, it just felt like everything went on pause, right? For months and months and months and months. It was a challenging time, different from like the global economic meltdown of 2007, 8, 9, 10, right? And even different from the pandemic of 2020 and 2021. Different, but I wrote down in every case, real estate and the industry seemed to always be trifurcated. I love that word. It drives some people nuts, but it got split into three factions always. So I wrote down, the non-producers continued to sell a home now and then if they were even lucky, and most left the industry, but they were replaced by another set of hopeful new agents. And then you always have the movable middle, right? The movable middle of real estate. The ones that, again, sell a house now and then, but find themselves usually just stuck, right? Stuck in the mud, maybe less committed, maybe not all in, maybe it's a hobby for them, but they're always there and they're in the office. So they're showing up on the Zoom sessions, gobbling up resources, and very frequently not selling many houses. And then you've got the top 25%. And if you've been to my live events or you've listened to my podcast before or seen my trainings, I talk a lot about my buddy Pat Vealing, who did a really nice job synthesizing the entire MLS and breaking it down last October for me into basically, the top 25% controlling 73.5% of all the volume. Not all the transactions, but very close, but all the volume, which is where you get paid. And when I think about each of those markets that I just mentioned, each of those moments in time in our industry where it has been challenging, right? I think about the top 25%. They've always seemed to figure out a way to sell more houses, to be more successful. So when I was reflecting back, as I was writing this on, 55, 60,000 hours of, one-on-one private sessions, Maxine Gellens and Marty Gellens for like 23 years now, or Timmy Smith. And I can name, hundreds and thousands of people that I've been blessed to work with, whether it was in a one-on-one setting, in a small group setting, CEO of management teams, doing live events and so much more, right? Answering, a countless number of questions, whether it is, walking the hallway or on Instagram, right? What I keep going through, right? What keeps going through my mind that I wrote down is, what is the difference that makes the difference? It's the age-old question, like, why do some people seem to always be wildly successful while others just seem to always struggle? And I'm not referring to the ones that are like not interested. I mean the ones that are interested, that are trying to figure it out, but they keep struggling. Do you know some people like that? Like maybe like they're sitting in your chair right now, maybe listening to this podcast. So listen up. I wrote down, why do some people struggle and others just absolutely consistently help more clients, make more money, sell more houses? So I started looking at it and saying, okay, I've done all this coaching, done all this work. I meet with all these amazing people. I have such a blessed life when it comes to exposure to what works in this business. There's a lot of coaches out there and a lot of great people. I just am blessed with a tremendous amount of exposure. And as my buddy Greg always says, I have the ability to synthesize all these complex things into more easily digestible, actionable steps, if that makes sense. So I wrote down, there's no doubt that, attitude, one's view of the world makes a difference. Your personal psychology, the way you think, the way you move, the questions you ask yourself, all of that is absolutely a factor. Being gritty or not, the ability to just have work ethic, there's no doubt. We know that makes a difference. Having a plan, having a process, yep, all that stuff definitely makes a difference. And I could literally go on and on and on and on, like tens and tens and tens of things that I know absolutely move the needle. And yet the two that seem to be the most obvious to me, right? The two that seem to be the most obvious to me, working with some of the most successful luxury agents that have been inside this studio or, over the phone or Zoom sessions or face-to-face, these monsters of the industry of the high end, some of the most successful team leaders. I'm traveling to Napa Valley tomorrow to spend time with about 40 teams and team leaders and their ops leader or their manager. I was looking at the numbers. The average profit was like $540,000 in the first 2.5 months, right? That was the average profit, not gross commission income. That was the average profit of the men and women I'll be working with over the next few days. So luxury agents, mega successful team leaders, CEOs of some of the biggest real estate and mortgage and tech companies. If I had to say, what are the two things at the core that make every one of them so successful? And I can almost look at, if you're with me right now in the studio, I've looked at this photo of David Bowie as another example of that. Kobe Bryant, right? Or Robert Horry over there, but I was thinking of Kobe Bryant as another beautiful example of this. So the thing I wrote down is number one is they lean in. Yes, they lean in versus getting frustrated, getting fearful. They embrace the unknown with a willingness. They embrace the unknown with a willingness to ask, how can I do it better? Who else is already winning at this? Who else is already doing this? What's another way? So I just got my ass kicked. I just lost. Things didn't go well. I had a plan and got punched in the face. It didn't work. And the ones that seem to always kill it are the ones that say, how can I get better? Who else is winning at this? And what's the model that I can emulate? Or what's another way I can do it? Versus the people that when faced with a challenge or an obstacle, right? Shrink, hide, run away. Screw it, I'll never do it again. All buyers are liars. Clients are horrible. I hate this business. That simple distinction, right? That simple distinction that Dr. Carol Dweck wrote about in her extraordinary book, The Growth Mindset. If you haven't read that book, you should read it today. You could probably go to YouTube right now and watch a few videos on her. But the first half of the book, she describes, what happens in around the third or fourth grade when faced with an obstacle, something we don't know. Do we lean in and say, teacher, I don't understand. Help me understand. I want to learn more. Is there more resources? What else can I do? Or do you kind of mentally or physically move to the back of the class and start hiding from it? She called it the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So when I think about all these extraordinary men and women that I've worked with, these incredible individuals and teams, one of the most important distinctions is when they get punched in the face, they lean in. When they lose, they lean in. When faced with something they don't understand, they lean in. So I wrote down, the question for you is, when your offer doesn't get accepted, when a prospect chooses someone else over you, or worse, you get this great connection and then they ghost you, do you get mad? Be honest. Be honest right now. Do you get mad? Or do you find and look for ways to act on getting better? So we all get ghosted. We all lose clients. We all have deals that don't go together. We all have great plans and intentions, and most of the time they don't work out. I was listening to an audiobook this morning, The Obstacle is the Way, and one of the moments in the book that I recall was how some companies will, people in a business will get mad that some months they don't make the profit that they want. Well, that's just a part of doing business, right? The question is, what do you learn from that? What are you going to do differently? Are you going to lean in, or are you going to complain, get frustrated, get mad? Stop for a second. Do you know someone who finds themselves always getting frustrated when things don't go their way? That is the most classic tell, right? Thinking of like poker, tell for someone that has a fixed mindset. So here's what I wrote down. Do Do you get mad? Or again, do you look for ways and act on ways to get better? Be honest with yourself. What I wrote down was, when you don't know how to use an app, as an example, something as simple as that, right? Do you ask for help, or do you hide it on your phone, or better yet, just delete it? And it's great because I'm looking at Brian, my producer, who's like nodding, like, right. Like, Brian, we've all been in that situation where it's like, oh, you got to download this app, and you open it up and you're like, it doesn't make sense, right? Instead of saying, let me take an hour, let me take 15 minutes, let me take 5 minutes and just start playing around with it, hoping that there's some, intuitiveness there that you can discover. Or do you just go, screw it, stupid app, right? I think most people today do the latter. So I wrote down, people who are continually winning in this market clearly have a growth mindset. Clearly, they have a growth mindset. And if you haven't read that book, I certainly encourage you to do so. But I think you get the general sense of the book. The general hook of the entire book is, do you lean in or do you fall back? Do you say, how can I do it? Who else is doing it? What's another approach I can take? Or do you go, screw it. These people are horrible. I hate this business. CRMs are stupid. I don't like technology. I'm afraid to do video, and all the other things we hear in the fixed mindset. So that's the first one. You think about 55, 60,000 hours of coaching. Makes me feel like I've been doing this for a long time because I'm young, but it just makes me think like I've been doing this for a long time. When you count up all the hours, all the time, all the conversations, all the successes, and all the tests that we would run that didn't work, right? That didn't work. Hey, let's send this email. It didn't work. Let's send this direct mail piece. It didn't work. Let's shoot this video. We think this is going to be the most remarkable video ever. And no one liked it and nobody shared it. That's all part of the journey. The growth mindset is continue to do more. Continue to examine. I think about my great friend and mentor, Jay Abraham, who would say all over and over again, a business and an individual that isn't constantly examining and rigorously re-examining everything they're doing is not a business he would ever want to invest in. Think about that. If you're not constantly examining and re-examining everything you're doing, right? That's not a business he wants to invest in. I also think about one of my mentors, Mike Vance, that would say, every business every 18 months has to do something radically different. Is it going into a new market? Is it buying a new company? Is it launching a new product? You've got to constantly be reinventing yourself to stay relevant and fresh in the marketplace. I wish he was alive because it'd be so interesting for him to share his perspective about how challenging this market is. Someone that, launched Orlando's Disneyland, right? He was Walt Disney's right-hand guy, which you've heard me talk about before. So going back to the second thing, because I think you get the first one, right? And as I'm looking at you in the camera, it's context specific. You have parts of your life where you're fixed and you have parts of your life where you're growth. And the key is to acknowledge that you have parts of your life where you have a growth mindset, right? Like if your child says, it's just hard for me to do this homework, go, well, you're in the third grade. Let's just blow off homework. No, you're like, I'm going to figure out a way to solve this problem because I know, this process they have to go through if they want to get out of school, right? Like you're going to do whatever it takes. Interesting. That's a growth mindset way of being. So you get that, right? So just acknowledge the areas where you got it and the areas where potentially it's fixed. Video is an area where I see a lot of people have a fixed mindset. Tom, I've got a face for radio. Okay, great. What are you going to do? Surprise your clients when you show up? You knock on the door and they answer, right? And they're freaked out because you, by the way, think you look a certain way that's not good on video. Like, kind of silly, right? Look at TV or movies today. Like, we're full of shapes and sizes and colors and looks and right. Like it's different strokes for different folks. Who cares? Create video anyway. That's the growth mindset. So second point, here's what I wrote down. It really falls suit because one almost begets the next. Did you watch the Super Bowl? Like this year, the Rams versus the Bengals. Brian knows I was there. I was blessed to be there with my son and my sons. Steve-O and Michael. My wife, Kathy, and one of my dear friends, Claudia Cole, who literally bought a ticket with me the night before because he has a growth mindset and he got a ticket literally one row in front of me for half the price, which I'm still kind of pissed about. But we all went to this game and It was a fantastic game. I wrote down, as a fan, right? Rams versus the Bengals in LA. Couldn't be better. Diehard, longtime Rams fan, Southern California guy in seventh heaven, but got frustrated watching the game because our basic moment was, hey, we're just going to keep running the ball, pound the ball, pound the ball. So when it's time for us to throw the ball, we're ready. It's kind of football 101, except if you were watching that game, as many of us were, we couldn't run the ball. And we would go 3 and out and 3 and out. And, yes, we'd throw the ball and we'd score and it'd be electrifying and it'd be exciting. But, the game is sort of predicated on running these plays to set up the next, except the plays they were running weren't working. Think about that as it relates to business. I remember the next day going to the gym in the morning, and I think it was on like a treadmill or something running. And I was watching something on YouTube that was like a 45-minute recap of the game. And there was this moment in the game when Coach Sean McVay, they caught him on audio, obviously, and he said, we can't run the ball. I'm not running the ball anymore. I'm not running the ball anymore. And if you watch the same little 45-minute video, you know exactly that moment. And that was it. Like they said, I'm not running the ball anymore. Why? Because that play isn't working. Think about it in your business. I wrote down, if you run plays that don't work, you don't win. Let me say it to you again. Business is like sports. And if you run plays in your business that don't work, you don't win. Or worse, you run plays in your business that work every now and then. And you get frustrated because you never know when it's going to work and when it's not. And you don't have the self-awareness to acknowledge that you're running a play that's potentially mediocre in business, right? When that happens, you don't win, or you don't win at the level that you want. Now, I wrote down, that's almost too simple, isn't it? Like, Brian, when you think about editing, you know that there's things that you do that work. I know when I'm recording, there's things that I do that work. When I'm writing, when I'm coaching, when I'm doing an event, when I'm building a business, when I'm, consulting with somebody, there's things that I know absolutely work, and you run them over and over and over and over and over until they don't. And that's the distinction. So I wrote down, the Rams won. Why? Was it, Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp? There's no doubt that made a difference. Right? The offense, they started throwing the ball, running very precise plays, and that no-look pass was devastating. And if you're a Bengals fan, I'm sorry. There's definitely some Bengal fans like sitting around us, and they were excited when they were winning, and they were very depressed, and many of them left the moment the game was over, some before. So not rubbing it in, just reminding you. So I wrote down the Rams won. Why? Because Stafford to Kupp, no doubt. Running routes that worked, running plays that worked, absolutely. And the defense, right? Bull rushing the quarterback over and over and over and over. They stopped all trickiness. It was just bull rush and attack, and finished that game with 7 sacks, right? 7 sacks. They were bull rushing because it worked. Now you're like, Tom, I'm not a football fan. What the hell are you talking about? I think you get the point. Number 1 is growth mindset. Lean in. Number 2 is run plays that work. So here's what I wrote down. You ready? I want you to stop for a second. And if you're writing, I really hope you are. If you're watching this, so many people will send me, Brian, do you see this on Instagram or like, certainly in stories of like people like sitting there with a glass of wine with their cat or their dog, and I'm on the big screen and it's my podcast. So if you're doing that ever, I love you. Thank you. And definitely take a photo and definitely tag me in it. It absolutely means the world to me. It's super cool. So here's what I wrote down. How many plays do you have? How many plays do you have? Like, can you open up your playbook for attracting listings? How many different ways can you attract listings? How many different ways in email and video and phone calls and knocking on doors and networking and calling your database and circle dialing and all the things that we've covered on my YouTube channel over and over and over again? How many different plays do you have that work? It's a great question to ask, right? Number 2, how many different ways do you have at winning the listing at the appointment? I was doing some work with, I won't say the team, but I had about 13 of the salespeople on this Zoom training. And we're going around the room. We're talking about the shortage of inventory and how it's challenging, and that sometimes we don't win listings, and there's competitors and they're discounters and blah, 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 blah. All the same shit that has been around forever, right? And I say, tell me about your preparation. Oh God, sometimes I'm running so fast, and I show up and I'm like literally in the car, and I'm, taking 2 seconds to look at the comps and I'm like, oh, is that a play that works? Is that a play that works? Like, I'm not prepared. I haven't done a crystal nose profile or a Cyrano profile on the client to understand their psychology or their disc profile. I don't have a Redfin and a Zillow and maybe 2 AVMs in terms of pricing, so I can think about what the client might be looking at before I get there. Who is the client, right? Who am I working with? And then what are the prices that they're looking at? And then looking at the comps to really walk in and absolutely know with authority and certainty. I don't know, that sounds like a play that might work. How many different plays do you have for finding listings, winning listings at the appointment, finding buyers, getting the buyer prepared to not lose 3 to 10 times before they finally get an offer accepted? How about writing and communicating offers that actually get accepted? How many plays do you have for working with generating more referrals from your past clients in Sphere? Do you have one play, hope and pray? Do you have a second play, email? A third play, call? A fourth play, text? A fifth play, events? I mean, there's so many plays that you can run. And I know as you sit here and you listen, right, you're probably like, oh God, he's like punching me in the head over and over again. It's called carefrontation. That's actually in my notes coming up. But I'm saying it to you now. I want you to get, like, nobody in this game is perfect, right? Perfect is not a standard, right? What we want to have is that growth mindset to keep improving, to keep getting better, because, like, I want you to feel fulfilled, not frustrated. Do you get that? I want you to feel fulfilled. Like, I love this business. I'm learning and growing every day. I'm serving clients. I'm getting punched in the face now and then. But gosh, if all I ever did was win, life would be really boring. Brian, do you ever watch The Twilight Zone? Yeah. How old are you, Brian? 24. All right. So there was a show when the world was black and white. It was called The Twilight Zone. And there was a Twilight Zone episode of a gangster kind of low-level guy who dies, and he wakes up and he thinks he's in heaven. And heaven happens to be, if anybody that's watched this, you know the exact show I'm referring to. He wakes up and this butler comes in and says, sir, welcome. This is your beautiful suite. Would you like to go gamble? Oh, I'd love to gamble. He's like, wow, this is what heaven is like. He goes downstairs and he gambles and he wins and he wins and he wins and he wins and he wins. He's like, would you like a beautiful meal? Sure. Food. This is so great. This is so great. This is so great. And then would you like some, again, this is the Twilight Zone and it was probably in 1950 or 60. I don't know. Would you like some beautiful women? And the women come in and everything is winning. Perfect. And the guy's like, to the butler, this is kind of boring. He's like, well, sir, this is what you wanted, right? I mean, you're winning, everything is great. He's like, yeah, but like, I need some spice of life. Like I need to lose now and then. I need to not have the best of the best all the time. And he's like, I got to tell you, if this is what heaven is, I'm kind of interested in checking out the other place. And the butler looks at him and says, who said you were in heaven? Interesting, right? Great old Twilight Zone. I don't even know where that thought came from. It was definitely not in my notes. My point to you is we want to run plays that work over and over and over again, but I don't want you to think that you're still going to win every single time. You're just going to win way more often with way more certainty and serve way more clients because you took the time to have the growth mindset and rethink about your plays. So, do you have effective plays for negotiations, for filming videos that educate, entertain, and gain trust? Do you have plays that work for hiring teammates or onboarding teammates as an example? I think you get the point. And I actually did write down. It could be you, no doubt. But my experience tells me if you're struggling and always feeling more frustration than fulfillment, it's probably caused by running plays that don't work, or worse, work now and then and you never know when is. And 2, the unwillingness to lean in and try something new. Now, there's a pretty good chance, since you're listening to my podcast or watching this on YouTube, that you are that kind of person, and yet you're still feeling the frustration. So I wrote down the following. Ready? If I'm pissing you off, good. That means I'm getting under your skin, and sometimes that's what I need to do. It's called carefrontation, as I mentioned earlier. It's my way of poking at you and prodding at you to get, I want you to be more happy. I want you to be more fulfilled. I want you to be more successful. I want you to win more than you lose, right? And I know that that requires making adjustments. So the question is, do you want to make the adjustments? And again, you're listening, so I know you do. So I've got 3 recommendations before I end this show. My first recommendation would be, I would list out right now all the areas of my business that aren't running optimally. Think about it. List out all the areas of your business. I'm going to take a little sip of water. I'm sure that sounded hysterical on the podcast. Brian, that sound good? Me gulping water? I want you to list out all the areas of your business that aren't running optimally and then rank them in terms of solve immediately, solve later, right? Rank them from like, hey, I need to get this done now. I need a play that works now for writing offers that get accepted. I need a play now for sitting down with buyers and doing an effective consultation that gets them to understand through case studies and data and examples why they don't want to write 7 offers, 8 offers, 9 offers, which means falling in love with the house 4, 5, 6, 7 times and not getting it. I want to get them through the pain, right? And get them to what they want faster, as an example. That might be more immediate for you. So that'd be the first thing. Write out all the plays and create, if you will, the prioritization of the playbook that you most want. Second thing I wrote down is maybe it's time to come to a training. Yes, live events are back. If you go to tomferry.com/events, you're going to see that we're doing the Edge event. We're doing Blueprint. We're doing the Summit. We got all kinds of stuff going on. Maybe it's time for that. Maybe it's time for you. If not us, then something, right? Just being back in a room surrounded by a bunch of people that are leaning in. You know the power of that. It's not always me, the presenter, or the other presenter. Sometimes it's just being in that room gets you re-inspired, gets you re-engaged, gets you thinking differently, right? But I also wrote down under number 2, once you identify the immediate to future, then you go back to my YouTube channel, or as a client, you go into a Loom, right? And you hit the search bar and you dig into all the things that we've been publishing, myself and others, that are plays that work, right? I think of just, from the beginning of this year, like how much content we put out on marketing, on negotiations, on buyer consultations, on listing appointments, all these different plays that you can then take and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this piece, this piece, this piece, and I'm going to add it into my playbook, and I'm going to go test this stuff. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to send the email. I'm going to shoot the video. I'm going to use the script. I'm going to say the line, and I'm going to watch what happens. And yeah, I still might be bobbing and weaving and occasionally get hit, but I'm going to keep moving forward. That's the game. I'm going to keep moving forward. And then for my client, if you're a coaching client, listen up. I wrote down, I would then create a new accountability with your coach, right? A new measurement of success or a new thing that you want to go from X to Y at. So it could be buyer consultations every time, sharing stats like we talked about a minute ago. It could be my offer to accepted ratio. I want to cut that from 6 to 2 as an example. And when you create that accountability, what happens, right? We know when you measure performance, performance improves. We know when you measure performance and you have to communicate that result back to someone else, the rate of improvement begins to accelerate, right? It's Pearson's law. It just is what it is. So as a client, I'm going to encourage you to do that today, right? Write it out and then send it to your coach and say, this is where I want to get better. This is where I want my playbook to be more sophisticated, to be more effective. And then my third recommendation I wrote down for you is maybe it's hire a coach. Maybe it's time for someone to provide you more plays, right? More plays that you know are effective or tailor-made to you, to your market. Someone that can give you the guidance that you need to be the most effective you can be. So I just wrote down, just like a Sean McVay with the Rams, right? It's finding that coach that can help you run effective plays, guide and direct and push and encourage and motivate. And I loved, like with Sean McVay, where he literally kept saying to people, I love you, man. I love you. And I think about how many clients I have that I say, I love you, right? And it's true, right? It's that kind of relationship. I wrote down, maybe for you, it's time for that kind of relationship. I don't know. So as I wrap this up, right, you got lots of actions to take now. You want to look at all the plays that you're working. What drives you nuts? What makes you frustrated? Let's look at those plays. Then with that sort of stacked rank of what's most important, what's least important, then look at training. Then go back to YouTube or Illumine, all the free content, all the content that's already available to you. And then third, maybe it's time for you to get a coach, to have somebody on your side helping you push and navigate and make this whole thing work. You decide. It's your business. It's your life. You're in control. All right. Brian, this was super fun talking to you, and thank you for meeting me on an early Saturday morning to record this podcast. Thank you for listening. And hey, Make sure you ring the notification button. Make sure you hit subscribe if you're new to me. And hey, make sure you check out all the other stuff that we've got here because I am committed to your greatness. All right. I'll see you soon.